The summer heat in London was unbearable that Tuesday afternoon. Thousands of tourists crowded around Buckingham Palace, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Among them stood Marcus Thompson, a 28-year-old social media influencer from California, who had traveled to England specifically to create viral content for his YouTube channel. Marcus had been planning this trip for months. His followers constantly demanded more exciting content, and his recent videos had been getting fewer views. The pressure to create something spectacular was eating at him. He needed something that would shock people, something that would get millions of shares and make him internet famous overnight. As he positioned himself near the palace gates, Marcus pulled out his expensive camera equipment. He had spent his entire savings on this trip, convinced that one viral video would change his life forever. His girlfriend Sarah had warned him about going too far for content, but Marcus brushed off her concerns. Fame was worth any risk, he believed. The crowd around him buzzed with excitement as the royal guards began their ceremonial march. These guards, dressed in their iconic red uniforms and tall black hats, moved with perfect precision. Their faces remained completely emotionless, a tradition that had been maintained for centuries. Tourists snapped photos and whispered in amazement at their discipline. Marcus studied the guards carefully, noticing how they never broke character no matter what happened around them. Children ran past them. People called out to them, cameras flashed constantly, but the guards remained like stone statues. This gave Marcus an idea that would soon change everything. He remembered seeing videos online where tourists tried to make the guards react. Most attempts failed miserably, but Marcus was confident he could succeed where others had failed. He started filming himself, explaining to his camera how he planned to create the most shocking royal guard content ever seen. The temperature climbed higher as the afternoon progressed. Sweat dripped down Marcus's face as he waited for the perfect moment. He noticed one particular guard standing at attention near the main entrance. This guard, Sergeant William Hayes, had been serving the royal family for over 15 years. His record was spotless, his dedication unwavering. Marcus didn't know anything about William's background. He didn't know that William had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before joining the Royal Guard. He didn't know that William's father had also been a Royal Guard, or that this job meant everything to William's family. To Marcus, the guard was just a prop for his video. As the ceremony continued, Marcus grew more impatient. His followers were expecting something big, and he couldn't disappoint them. He had promised them content that would break the internet, and he intended to deliver. The thought of going home empty-handed terrified him more than any consequences his actions might bring. The crowd pressed closer to the gates as the main ceremony began. Hundreds of phones and cameras pointed toward the guards, all hoping to capture the perfect shot. Marcus positioned himself strategically, knowing he would need to act quickly once he made his move. His heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Sarah's voice echoed in his mind, warning him about crossing lines for the sake of content. But Marcus pushed those thoughts away. This was his moment, his chance to finally make it big. He convinced himself that it was just harmless fun, that the guard would probably laugh about it later. The guard stood perfectly still, his eyes focused straight ahead, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. The centuries of tradition and dignity that he represented meant nothing to Marcus. All that mattered was getting the perfect shot, the perfect reaction, the perfect viral moment that would change his life forever. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out a large water bottle he had purchased earlier that morning. The plastic bottle was cold from the air conditioning in the nearby shop, and condensation dripped down its sides. He had filled it completely, thinking he might need it to stay cool in the London heat. Now it would serve a very different purpose. The crowd around him continued to grow thicker as more tourists arrived for the ceremony. Marcus used this to his advantage, slowly working his way closer to where Sergeant Hayes stood at attention. The guard's position was perfect for Marcus's plan, close enough to the crowd for easy access, but visible to hundreds of onlookers who would witness whatever happened next. Marcus began recording on his phone with one hand, while holding the water bottle with the other. His hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline. This was it, his big moment. He started narrating quietly to his camera, building up the suspense for his future viewers. "Okay, guys, you're about to see something absolutely insane," he whispered into his phone. "I'm about to do what no one else has ever dared to do. This is going to break the internet, I guarantee it. Make sure you share this video with everyone you know. The ceremony music played loudly, masking his words from nearby tourists. Marcus took several deep breaths, psyching himself up for what he was about to do. He had seen countless videos of people trying to get reactions from royal guards, but none of them had gone as far as he was planning to go. Sergeant Hayes remained perfectly motionless, his training keeping him focused despite the chaos of tourists around him. He had dealt with everything during his 15 years of service, people trying to touch him, making funny faces, even small children tugging at his uniform. But he had never experienced what was coming. Marcus moved even closer, now just a few feet away from the guard. Other tourists assumed he was simply trying to get a better photo and didn't pay much attention to him. The water bottle felt heavy in his hand as he unscrewed the cap, the sound barely audible over the crowd noise and ceremonial music. His heart raced as he raised his phone higher, making sure he had the perfect angle to capture both his face and the guard's reaction. This was going to be the money shot, the moment that would make him famous. He imagined millions of people watching this video, sharing it, talking about it. The thought filled him with excitement. The guard's discipline was absolute. Even with Marcus standing so close, Hayes kept his eyes forward, his expression blank, his body perfectly still. This was exactly what Marcus was counting on, the dramatic contrast between his shocking action and the guard's expected stoic response. Marcus glanced around, quickly to make sure no security was watching him too closely. The palace security was focused on the larger crowd and the ceremony itself. This was his window of opportunity, and he knew it wouldn't last long. Once he acted, everything would change very quickly. He positioned the water bottle directly above the guard's head, his phone camera rolling the entire time. The moment felt surreal, like he was watching himself from outside his body. Part of him couldn't believe he was actually going through with this crazy plan. "This is for all my subscribers who wanted to see something epic," he whispered to his camera. "You asked for it, so here it is." The most insane royal guard prank ever attempted. The weight of the full water bottle made his arm ache as he held it high above the guard's tall black hat. Marcus knew that once he tipped that bottle, there would be no going back. His entire life would change in the next few seconds, though not in the way he expected. Sergeant Hayes continued his duty, completely unaware that in mere moments, his own life would take an unexpected turn. The guard had no idea that this tourist's desperate grab for internet fame would lead to consequences that neither of them could have imagined. Marcus's finger hovered over his phone's record button one more time, making sure everything was perfectly positioned. The crowd noise seemed to fade away as he focused entirely on this single moment that would define his future. Without another moment of hesitation, Marcus tilted the water bottle and poured the entire contents over Sergeant Hayes's head. The cold water cascaded down the guard's face, soaking his iconic red uniform and dripping onto the pristine palace grounds. The shock of the cold liquid was immediate and jarring. The crowd's reaction was instant and explosive. Gasps echoed through the air as hundreds of tourists witnessed the unprecedented disrespect. Cameras and phones that had been casually recording the ceremony suddenly focused intently on the unfolding drama. Children pointed in confusion while their parents pulled them back in horror. Marcus kept his phone camera rolling, capturing every second of what he believed would be his claim to fame. A huge grin spread across his face as he watched the water drip from the guard's hat. He expected the guard to break character, to shout, to react in some dramatic way that would make for perfect viral content. But Sergeant Hayes did something completely unexpected. Despite the water streaming down his face and soaking through his uniform, he remained absolutely motionless. Not a single muscle in his body moved. His eyes stayed fixed straight ahead, his expression unchanged, his posture perfect. It was as if nothing had happened at all. The crowd fell into a stunned silence. This wasn't the reaction anyone had anticipated. Most people expected the guard to break protocol, to respond with anger or at least acknowledge what had just occurred. Instead, they witnessed something far more powerful. Absolute professional discipline in the face of humiliation. Marcus's smile began to fade as he realized his plan wasn't working as expected. He had counted on getting a big reaction, something that would shock viewers and generate millions of shares. But the guard's complete lack of response was making Marcus look like a fool instead of a comedic genius. "Come on, say something," Marcus called out loudly, still recording. "Don't just stand there. His voice carried across the silent crowd, making his desperation obvious to everyone present. The tourists around him began to look at Marcus with disgust rather than amusement. Several people in the crowd started pulling out their own phones, but they weren't recording the guard anymore. They were recording Marcus, capturing his face, his voice, his complete lack of respect for British tradition and dignity. These videos would soon spread across social media, but not in the way Marcus had hoped. Palace security began moving through the crowd, having been alerted to the disturbance. Their trained eyes quickly identified Marcus as the source of the problem. But before they could reach him, something extraordinary happened that would change everything. Sergeant Hayes finally moved, but not in anger or frustration. Instead, he slowly and deliberately reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a crisp white handkerchief. With the same precision he used for all his ceremonial duties, he began to carefully wipe the water from his face. The crowd watched in complete fascination as the guard methodically cleaned himself while maintaining perfect posture. His movements were so controlled and dignified that what should have been a moment of humiliation transformed into something almost majestic. Every action demonstrated years of training and unwavering commitment to his duty. Marcus continued filming, but his confidence was rapidly evaporating. This wasn't going according to plan at all. The guard wasn't providing the explosive reaction that would make for viral content. Instead, Marcus was becoming the villain in his own video. An elderly British woman in the crowd stepped forward and spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Young man, that guard has served our country with honor for years. What you just did is absolutely disgraceful." Her words carried the weight of genuine outrage, and murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. More voices joined in, criticizing Marcus's behavior. The crowd that had initially been curious onlookers was now turning against him. Some people demanded that security arrest him immediately. Others called for him to apologize to the guard right away. Marcus realized that his viral video dream was turning into a nightmare. The guard's dignified response was making Marcus look petty and disrespectful by comparison. But the situation was far from over, and Sergeant Hayes had something more to show the world than just professional restraint. After carefully cleaning his face with the handkerchief, Sergeant Hayes did something that left the entire crowd speechless. He looked directly at Marcus for the first time, his eyes meeting the tourists' gaze with an intensity that cut through all the noise and chaos around them. When Hayes spoke, his voice was calm but carried absolute authority. It wasn't loud, but every single person in the vicinity could hear him clearly. "Sir, I want you to know that this uniform represents something far greater than you or me," he began. His words measured and deliberate. Marcus froze, his phone still recording but his hand beginning to shake. This wasn't the angry outburst he had expected. The guard's composed response was far more unsettling than any shouting would have been. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that they were about to witness something truly remarkable. "I have worn this uniform with pride for 15 years, Hayes continued, water still dripping from his red jacket. "Before me, my father wore it for 23 years. This isn't just a job or a costume for tourists to mock. This represents centuries of tradition, honor, and service to something bigger than ourselves." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Even Marcus had stopped grinning, realizing that he had unleashed something far more powerful than he had bargained for. The guard's dignified response was making Marcus's prank look increasingly childish and cruel. Hayes took a small step forward, maintaining perfect military posture despite his soaked uniform. "I've served 3 tours in Afghanistan, protecting people I've never met, including Americans like yourself. I've stood guard in the rain, snow, and scorching heat because duty doesn't take breaks for comfort." Several people in the crowd began to tear up as they realized the depth of disrespect that had just occurred. This wasn't just a harmless prank on a costumed performer. This was an assault on a decorated veteran who had risked his life for others. "You came here looking for entertainment," Hayes said, his voice growing slightly stronger. "But what you've done is shown complete disregard for the sacrifice that thousands of men and women in uniform make every single day. We don't stand here for your amusement. We stand here to honor our country and our queen." Marcus wanted to disappear into the ground. His viral video plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making the guard look foolish, he had given Hayes a platform to demonstrate exactly why royal guards deserved respect and admiration. The sergeant reached into another pocket and pulled out a small military medal, a service decoration he had earned during his time in combat. He held it up so Marcus and the crowd could see it clearly. This represents the friends I lost overseas, the families who will never see their loved ones again, and the commitment we all made to serve something greater than ourselves. A woman in the crowd started clapping slowly. Others quickly joined in, creating a sustained applause that seemed to go on forever. They weren't just clapping for Hayes, they were showing respect for all service. Members who had been dishonored by Marcus's thoughtless actions, Hayes carefully returned the medal to his pocket and straightened his soaked uniform as much as possible. "Young man, I hope you got the video you wanted. But I also hope you learned something today about respect, tradition, and what it truly means to serve others." The crowd's applause grew louder, with some people shouting words of support and gratitude to the guard. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of it all, his phone still recording his own humiliation. Palace security was now just a few feet away, ready to escort him from the premises. But Sergeant Hayes wasn't finished. He had one more surprise that would completely change how this story ended and turn Marcus's selfish prank into a lesson that would be remembered for years to come. The guard's next words would not only shock Marcus, but would demonstrate a level of grace and wisdom that would make this encounter legendary among all who witnessed it. Just as Palace security reached out to apprehend Marcus, Sergeant Hayes raised his hand in a gesture that stopped them immediately. The crowd watched in amazement as the guard, still dripping wet from the prank, made a decision that no one could have predicted. "Officers, please wait," Hayes said with the same calm authority he had shown throughout the entire incident. "I'd like to speak with this young man for another moment." The security personnel stepped back respectfully, though they remained close enough to intervene if necessary. Marcus looked confused and terrified. He had expected to be arrested, banned from the country, or worse. The last thing he anticipated was for the victim of his prank to request more time with him. His phone continued recording, though his hands were now shaking so badly that the video was becoming unsteady. Hayes walked closer to Marcus, closing the distance between them until they stood face to face. The height difference made Marcus feel even smaller, but the guard's expression wasn't angry or threatening. Instead, it showed something unexpected, compassion mixed with disappointment. "What's your name, son?" Hayes asked quietly, his voice gentle despite everything that had just happened. The question caught Marcus completely off guard. He had prepared for anger, for consequences, for punishment, but not for basic human kindness. Marcus," he stuttered, barely able to get the words out. "Marcus Thompson." His voice cracked with emotion as the full weight of his actions began to sink in. The guard's dignified response was making Marcus feel worse than any punishment could have. "Marcus, I want you to understand something," Hayes continued, his voice still calm and measured. "I'm not angry with you. Disappointed, yes, but not angry. I've seen enough real conflict and genuine evil in this world to know the difference between malice and poor judgment." The crowd listened intently, amazed by the guard's grace under pressure. Many people were now openly filming the exchange, but their focus had shifted completely from entertainment to admiration for Hayes's extraordinary response to such disrespectful treatment. "I believe you're a good person who made a very bad choice," Hayes said, looking directly into Marcus's eyes. "We all make mistakes, especially when we're young and trying to prove ourselves. The question is what we learn from those mistakes and how we grow from them." Marcus felt tears beginning to form in his eyes. This wasn't how he had imagined this moment would go. He had expected consequences, but he hadn't expected forgiveness. The guard's kindness was making him feel the full shame of his actions in a way that anger never could have. "I want to offer you something," Hayes said, reaching into his uniform once again. This time he pulled out a small card with the royal insignia on it. "This is an invitation to return here next week as my personal guest. I want you to meet some of the other guards to learn about our history and traditions." The crowd gasped at this unexpected gesture. Even the security officers looked surprised by the guard's generous response. Marcus stared at the card in disbelief, unable to comprehend why someone he had just humiliated was showing him such kindness. "But there's one condition," Hayes added, his voice becoming slightly more serious. "I want you to use your social media platform for good. Instead of posting that video you just recorded for cheap laughs, I want you to create content that shows people what real service and sacrifice look like. Marcus nodded frantically, overwhelmed by the guard's unexpected mercy. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. I'm so sorry for what I did. I never thought about what it really meant. I just wanted to get views and followers, but I see now how wrong that was. Hayes smiled for the first time since the incident began. A genuine warm smile that transformed his entire face. That's all I wanted to hear, Marcus. Sometimes we need to experience grace to understand how to give it to others. The crowd erupted in applause once again, but this time it was for both men. For Hayes's incredible demonstration of forgiveness and for Marcus's apparent genuine remorse. What had started as a disrespectful prank was turning into a powerful lesson about human dignity and redemption. 1 week later, Marcus returned to Buckingham Palace, but this time he came as a completely different person. The events of the previous week had haunted him every single day. He had deleted the original prank video without ever posting it, despite knowing it could have gotten millions of views. Instead, he had spent the week researching the history of the Royal Guards and learning about military service. Marcus arrived early in the morning, dressed respectfully in a simple button-down shirt and slacks, a stark contrast to the casual tourist clothes he had worn during his first visit. He carried professional camera equipment, but this time his purpose was entirely different. He wanted to create something meaningful, something that would honor rather than mock the guards and their service. Sergeant Hayes met him at the palace gates, now wearing a perfectly clean and pressed uniform. The guard's warm smile immediately put Marcus at ease, though the young man still felt deeply ashamed of their first meeting. Hayes had clearly forgiven him, but Marcus wasn't sure he had forgiven himself yet. I'm glad you came back, Marcus, Hayes said, extending his hand for a firm handshake. I've arranged for you to meet several of my fellow guards and learn about what we really do here. I think you'll find their stories quite interesting. Throughout the day, Marcus interviewed 5 different royal guards, each with their own remarkable background. He met Sarah Mitchell, one of the first female guards who had overcome incredible obstacles to earn her position. He spoke with James Connor, a young guard who had joined after losing his brother in military service overseas. Each story moved Marcus deeply. These weren't just ceremonial figures standing around for tourist photos. They were real people with families, dreams, struggles, and an incredible dedication to serving something bigger than themselves. Marcus realized how shallow and ignorant his original prank had been. The most powerful moment came when Hayes introduced Marcus to Robert Sterling, a retired guard who had served for 30 years. Sterling was now in his 70s, but his pride in the uniform and the institution remained as strong as ever. He spoke about the honor of serving multiple monarchs and the deep responsibility that came with representing his country. When you put on this uniform, Sterling explained to Marcus's camera, you're not just representing yourself anymore. You're carrying the hopes, dreams, and sacrifices of everyone who wore it before you. That's not something we take lightly. Marcus conducted each interview with genuine curiosity and respect. His questions were thoughtful and his approach was professional. The guards could see that he had truly learned from his mistake and was now committed to telling their stories properly. As the day progressed, Marcus began to understand something profound about service and sacrifice. These guards weren't performing for tourists. They were continuing a tradition that connected them to centuries of history and honor. His prank had been an attack on something sacred, and now he felt called to help protect and celebrate it instead. Hayes took Marcus to see the memorial wall where names of fallen service members were inscribed. As they stood in silence, Marcus felt the full weight of what military service really meant. These weren't just jobs or careers. These were life commitments to protecting others, often at great personal cost. I want to ask you something, Marcus, Hayes said as they stood before the memorial. What do you think your followers really need to see? More pranks and cheap entertainment, or stories that might inspire them to serve others and find real purpose in their lives? Marcus didn't hesitate with his answer. They need to see this, he said, gesturing to the memorial and then to Hayes. They need to understand what real strength and honor look like. I've been giving them junk food when I should have been offering them something nutritious for their souls. By the end of the day, Marcus had gathered enough material for a documentary-style video that would tell the real story of the Royal Guards, but more importantly, he had discovered a new purpose for his platform and his life. The young man who had come to London seeking cheap fame had found something far more valuable, a mission to inspire others through stories of genuine heroism and service. 3 months after his return to California, Marcus had completely transformed his social media presence. The documentary-style video he created about the Royal Guards had become his most successful content ever, garnering over 10 million views and thousands of comments from people expressing newfound respect for military service members worldwide. The video opened with Marcus standing in the same spot where he had committed his thoughtless prank. But now he spoke with genuine humility and purpose. He told the complete story: his original shameful intentions, Sergeant Hayes's incredible response, and the profound lessons he had learned about honor, service, and human dignity. Marcus's follower count had actually grown significantly, but for entirely different reasons than he had originally hoped. People were drawn to his authentic transformation and his commitment to using his platform responsibly. Comments poured in from veterans, active service members, and civilians who felt inspired by both Hayes's grace and Marcus's redemption. The impact extended far beyond social media. Marcus had partnered with several military support organizations, using his influence to raise awareness and funds for veteran services. He regularly featured stories of service members, first responders, and other everyday heroes who put others before themselves. Sergeant Hayes and Marcus had maintained their friendship through regular video calls and messages. Hayes often shared stories from other guards who had been inspired by Marcus's transformation. The incident that could have ended both their reputations had instead become a powerful example of forgiveness and growth. Marcus received an unexpected phone call one afternoon that would bring their story full circle. It was Hayes, calling with news that the British military wanted to officially recognize Marcus's efforts to honor service members through his platform. They were inviting him back to London for a special ceremony. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself back at Buckingham Palace, but this time as an honored guest rather than a disruptive tourist. He was accompanied by his girlfriend Sarah, who had watched his transformation with amazement and pride. She had supported his new mission from the beginning, seeing the positive changes in his character and purpose. The ceremony was small but meaningful. Marcus was presented with a certificate of appreciation for his work in promoting military service and sacrifice through social media. More importantly to him, he was given the opportunity to address a group of young guards about the power of second chances and personal growth. As he spoke to the assembled guards, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. The young man who had once been willing to humiliate others for internet fame now stood before some of the most honorable people he had ever met, sharing a message of respect and service. "I came here months ago as a fool looking for cheap entertainment," Marcus told the group. "Sergeant Hayes could have had me arrested, banned, or publicly shamed. Instead, he chose to see the person I could become rather than just the person I was in that moment. That choice changed everything." After the ceremony, Marcus and Hayes walked together through the palace grounds where their story had begun. The spot where Marcus had poured water on the guard was now just another part of the palace tour route, with no visible reminder of that day's events. But both men would carry the lessons from that moment for the rest of their lives. "I want you to know something, Marcus," Hayes said as they concluded their walk. "What you've done with your platform since that day has touched more lives than you realize. I get messages from service members around the world who feel valued and appreciated because of your content. You've turned a moment of disrespect into a movement of honor." Marcus smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced during his fame-seeking days. "I finally understand what you meant about serving something bigger than yourself," he replied. "I just wish it hadn't taken such a foolish mistake for me to learn that lesson." As Marcus prepared to return to California, he carried with him not just memories of redemption, but a lifelong commitment to using his influence responsibly. The tourist who had once thrown water on a royal guard as a prank had become an advocate for the very values he had once mocked, proving that even the most thoughtless actions can lead to profound transformation when met with grace and wisdom.